Hi everybody, welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. About a month ago, I made a video called The Temple, Unlocking Knowledge in Our Spirits to Become Part of Our Flesh. It had to do with temple ordinances and just some really fascinating quotes. And as I was making that video, there was one quote I had heard one time, a really long time ago, like back in my childhood, I think. And I asked you if you knew where I could find it. And I got this comment. I think there may have been some other comments, but this is the first one that I found. This is from Music Blick. The quote you were looking for was likely from President David O. McKay, who, after finishing an endowment ceremony, exclaimed, "I think I'm beginning to understand it." He was in his 90s. This was later reported by Elder Boyd K. Packer and was printed in the BYU Journal, and then Music Blick gives the reference. So thank you so much for pointing me in the right direction. Whenever I get a quote, I like to go to the original source, not just to verify it for myself, but also so many times as you read the surrounding material, the sentences and paragraphs before and after, you find more stuff. And so, okay, so I went looking for this, and yeah, here it is. Here's the reference that Music Blick gave. And then that led me, I looked a little bit further, and it turns out that this was in Teachings of Presidents of the Church, David O. McKay, the church manual. And it gives a more full account of that story than what was in the BYU thing. And then it has a reference. Footnote 50 takes you to The Holy Temple, published in 1980. And this was a book written by Elder Boyd K. Packer. At the time, Elder Boyd K. Packer. He later became president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. We have visited this book a number of times. You can find this on archive.org. But this is a book that is full of gems. So many things. This is probably one of the best books. If I had to limit my book collection to, say, like 10 books of this type, this would definitely be in my collection. Okay, so this is under a section called Understanding Comes Through Obedience. If you own this book, this is page 263. All right, here we go. Not long before President McKay died, he spoke to the general authorities in the temple meeting just prior to a general conference. Okay, really quick, before I continue, I think the temple meeting that's being referred to is the weekly meeting that they have in the Salt Lake Temple. Right now it's being held in the Joseph Smith Memorial Building. We've looked up articles that have said that the 8th floor of the Joseph Smith Memorial Building has been turned into a temple space. But whenever the Salt Lake Temple is done with the renovation and rededicated, you have this room right here that's, it's above the celestial room and underneath the assembly room. You have this room where all 15 meet. And I did this very interesting video. This was 10 months ago, called Temple Meetings in Salt Lake Temple Planned and Influenced by Priesthood on the Other Side of the Veil. This was one of my favorite videos. Anyway, so I think it was in this setting, and then just before General Conference, like we just read. Okay, he talked of the temple ordinances and quoted at length from the ceremonies. Okay, quoted at length from the ceremonies. He explained them to us. That was not inappropriate, considering that we were in the temple. After he had spoken for some time, he paused and stood gazing up to the ceiling in deep thought. I remember that his big hands were in front of him, with his fingers interlocked. He stood gazing, as people sometimes do when pondering a deep question. Then he spoke. "Brethren, I think I am finally beginning to understand." Here he was, the prophet, an apostle for over half a century, And even then, he was learning. He was growing. His expression, "I think I am finally beginning to understand," was greatly comforting to me. Perhaps if he was learning still, I might not I might not be quite so much condemned for my state of relatively little understanding on many spiritual matters, provided that I'm still striving and learning. And then I want to read this next page. Brigham Young said it well, quote, "I will not say, as do many, that the more I learn, the more I am satisfied that I know nothing. For the more I learn, the more I discern an eternity of knowledge to improve upon." From Discourses of Brigham Young, page 250. Consider these verses from the Pearl of Great Price. "And he gave unto them commandments, that they should worship the Lord their God, and should offer the firstlings of their flocks for an offering unto the Lord. And Adam was obedient unto the commandments of the Lord. And after many days an angel of the Lord appeared unto Adam, saying, Why dost thou offer sacrifices unto the Lord? And Adam said unto him, I know not, save the Lord commanded me. And then the angel spake, saying, This thing is a similitude of the sacrifice of the only begotten of the Father, which is full of grace and truth. Wherefore thou shalt do all thou doest in the name of the Son, and thou shalt repent and call upon God in the name of the Son forevermore." From Moses 5, verses 5 through 8. The angel explained to Adam the purpose of the sacrifice. He would thereafter not only obey the commandment, but he would know why it was required of him. I can imagine that after Adam knew why the sacrifices were given to him by way of commandment, he went forward with a greater determination. I can imagine that he began to see a meaning and a purpose and a necessity for the commandment. It is quite possible that thereafter he approached his duty with great reverence and dedication, even determination. We also should be obedient. The fact that we have received a commandment from God is reason enough in itself to go and do as we've been directed to do. I have come to know that if we will do so, even though we may not understand at first, the Lord will tell us, as he told Adam, why we are so commanded. We must gain some feeling for why we build temples and why the ordinances are required of us. Thereafter, we are continually instructed and enlightened on matters of spiritual importance. It comes line upon line, precept upon precept, and then that's the end of the preview. So, I think that's just so interesting. The prophet, an apostle for over 50 years, in his 90s, who knows how many times he's gone to the temple, and in his own words, he said that he's finally beginning to understand. So, it would seem to me that the endowment, along with the initiatories, of course, and everything else being sealed, it's probably really deep and much deeper than what we realize, even if we think we know a lot. I know that there are many, many really good podcasts and YouTube channels and Instagram accounts that really help shed light on a lot of the symbolism and even history of the endowment and temple rites and ceremonies, and how we can see some of these things in other cultures, other civilizations of the past, as they tried to mimic these things. There's a lot of good scholarship, but even then, I'm not sure if we can really fully understand it in this life, just based on what we just read. So we should really try and go to the temple. I know that you're blessed as you do so. I've received those blessings, and you receive lots of blessings, protection, strength, but also understanding. We really have to be pondering these things. In some ways, it may see like at surface value, it may be like, oh yeah, it's it's clearly explained and this is what it is. But no, I think there's much, much deeper things to learn in the symbols and the sequence of events and and the acts and that you do and just all these things. I think it's really, really deep. Okay. And then I wanted to finish by reading a few quotes that I have on my quotes A through Z spreadsheet. This is currently row 163 for endowment. So what we just read is my newest quote on the spreadsheet for this row. And what's interesting is, okay, so President McKay passed away in 1970, and that was referenced in the quote that we just read. Just a couple years later, we have this. This is from Truman G. Madsen, professor of philosophy at BYU. This is a BYU devotional, March 5th, 1972. You can find it on byuspeeches.byu.edu. It's called A House of Glory. So let me read this. And this is kind of what got the ball rolling for me wanting to find this other quote. All right, he says, "Let me turn to a few remarks about the how of susceptibility. Listening once in Los Angeles to the plea of President McKay, stake president after stake president pledged contributions to make possible the building of the Los Angeles Temple. They committed. And then he arose and delivered a masterful discourse, maybe the greatest I have ever heard on the subject of temples. In shorthand, I jotted down one paragraph, which I'm going to quote, but before I do so, let me give this explanation. He told a girl I found later, who was his niece, and therefore felt confident in confiding in him. Earlier that year, she had been initiated in a sorority, and not long thereafter, she had gone through the temple, quote unquote, as we say. I wish that verb could be improved, going through the temple. I wish we could somehow speak of the temple going through us. I wish that my children had not been confused. It's my fault that they were when my wife and I used to say to them, we were going to do ceilings. They thought we would take a stepladder and a bucket. It's a kind of Mormon activism to talk about quote unquote temple work. There's a sense, of course, in which it is work, but too rarely do we speak of temple worship, which can send us back to our work changed. A man of God in the temple said in my hearing, I wonder if the dead are blessed as much as the living by the temple. I am impatient with people who are impatient in the temple. I am distressed when someone sits behind me with a stopwatch and keeps saying, they're 5 minutes behind, move, move, move. Isn't there one place we can go and leave our watch in the locker and rejoice if there are delays and embrace what is there for us? Well, on the occasion in Los Angeles, President McKay stopped everyone by saying, this young lady came to me. She had had both experiences, but said she had been far more impressed with her sorority. We gasped, as you did. President McKay was a master of the pause. He let that wait a minute and then said, brothers and sisters, she was disappointed in the temple. Brothers and sisters, I was disappointed in the temple. But then he finished his sentence, and so were you. Then no one gasped. He had us. Why were we? He asked. And then he named some of the things. We were not prepared. How could we be, fully? We had stereotypes in our minds, faulty expectations. We were unable to distinguish the symbol from the symbolized. We were not worthy enough. We were too inclined quickly to respond negatively, critically, and we had not yet seasoned spiritually. Those are my words, but they cover about what he said. I will give you the quotation verbatim. He said, brothers and sisters, I believe there are few. And then Truman Madsen says, and I remind you, this was a man at that time, 80 years of age, who had been in the temple every week for some 50 years, which gave him, I thought, some right to speak. And then continue with the quote, I believe there are few, even temple workers, who comprehend the full meaning and power of the temple endowment. Seen for what it is the step-by-step ascent. I pause to remind you of both strands of meaning. Ascent agreement, consent, covenant, but also assent, rise. And then continue with the quote. It is the step-by-step ascent into the eternal presence. If our young people could but glimpse it, it would be the most powerful spiritual motivation of their lives. So that's the end of the quote. And this is what made me think of the other quote that we read from the Holy Temple. So both of these come from President David O. McKay. And I think that we should think about that and ponder. Just a few more. We have this from, at the time, Elder Russell M. Nelson of the Quorum of the 12, April 2001, Ensign. The name of the article is Personal Preparation for Temple Blessings. In the temple, we receive an endowment, which is literally speaking a gift. In receiving this gift, we should understand its significance. And there it is right there. We need to understand it. We need to ponder. We need to receive revelation, study it out in our minds. Okay, so in receiving this gift, we should understand its significance and the importance of keeping sacred covenants. Each temple ordinance is not just a ritual to go through, it is an act of solemn promising. The temple endowment was given by revelation. Thus, it is best understood by revelation, prayerfully sought with a sincere heart. President Brigham Young said, "Your endowment is to receive all those ordinances in the house of the Lord, which are necessary for you after you have departed this life, to enable you to walk back to the presence of the Father and gain your eternal exaltation." Okay, and then just a couple more. Let's read this one from President Brigham Young in Journal of Discourses, Volume 10, page 309. Most of you, my brethren, are elders, 70s, or high priests. Perhaps there is not a priest or a teacher present. The reason of this is that when we give the brethren their endowments, we are obliged to confer upon them the Melchizedek priesthood. But I expect to see the day when we shall be so situated that we can say to a company of brethren, you can go and receive the ordinances pertaining to the Aaronic order of priesthood. And then you can go into the world and preach the gospel or do something that will prove whether you will honor that priesthood before you receive more. Now we pass them through the ordinances of both priesthoods in one day, but this is not as it should be, and would if we had a temple wherein to administer these ordinances. But this is all right at present. We should not be satisfied in any other way, and consequently, we do according to the circumstances we are placed in. The brethren receiving their endowments, and there are some persons who will not apostatize till they arrive at a certain point. Some apostatize at the Missouri River, and although they may be ever so angry, they will come here to get prepared to leave us, and others will live here a score of years and then apostatize. And it does appear as if some men are determined to prove that they are fools. We've had trouble with men who refuse to pay their tithing, but the time has now come when a man that will not pay his tithing is not fit to be in the church. The time has come when those who profess to be saints must live according to the laws of the holy priesthood, or they cannot enjoy its benefits. May the Lord bless you all and help you to be faithful is my prayer. Amen. And then let's read this one from President George Q. Cannon, first counselor in the first presidency. You can find this in Gospel Truth, Discourses and Writings of President George Q. Cannon, Volume 1, pages 227 to 228. The section is called Endowments Too Easily Obtained. All right, he says, I believe that our endowments are too easily obtained. Men and women go to the temples who do not understand the value of the precious blessings that are bestowed upon them. And I have felt for years that something should be done to change this so that instead of it being necessary for a man to receive the Melchizedek priesthood, he will first manifest his efficiency in the Aaronic priesthood and show his capabilities in good desires before receiving the higher priesthood. I firmly believe that this will be so sometime, and that men will not get the fullness of the endowment with the ease that they have done, but will receive that part which belongs to the Aaronic priesthood. These blessings become so common that many people do not value them or know how to use them. That's interesting. When the prophet Joseph first communicated that the Lord had revealed to him the keys of the endowment, I can remember the great desire there was on every hand to understand something about them. When the prophet would speak about his desire to complete the temple in order that he might impart unto his fellow servants that which God had delivered to him, a thrill went through the congregation, and a great desire for this filled their hearts. Then, when he did communicate the endowments to a few persons before the temple was completed, the whole people were moved with desire to complete the temple in order that they might receive these great blessings therein. They were valued beyond price. A man that could go in and get his endowments was looked upon as though he had received some extraordinary blessing, something akin to that which the angels received. And it was estimated and valued in that way. Let me just pause right here. So this is obviously the Nauvoo period. Pretty soon here, I'm going to be going back to Nauvoo. Since we've moved here to Independence, we've been able to go 2 times. And those are my first 2 times going to Nauvoo. And I just think about historic Nauvoo. There's a bunch of buildings, and then you go a little ways and you come to the temple. And gosh, I wish I could go back in time and just see this. You know, we get a little glimpse of it here, but I can kind of just imagine the setting and what it must have been like. If you get a chance to go to Nauvoo, please go. And please come here to Independence, Missouri, and come see the sights in Northwest Missouri. Okay, continuing. How is it now? There's a complete indifference, it may be said, in relation to it. Young people go there stupid, with no particular desire, only to get married, without realizing the character of the obligations that they take upon themselves, or the covenants that they make, and the promises involved in the taking of these covenants. The result is, hundreds among us go to the house of the Lord and receive these blessings and come away without any particular impression made upon them. I think that this is deplorable. When men have gifts and blessings bestowed upon them, and they do not value them, they become a cause of condemnation rather than blessing. It seems to me that there should be exceeding great care taken in this respect. I would rather, though I would not like it, a son of mine be married by a bishop than to have him go to the temple in an unfit condition and receive these blessings. It would be far better for him. So, yeah, these are some of my favorite quotes about the endowment. I have another row here for endowment, power of, but I'm not going to read anything from that in this video. But you can access my spreadsheets anytime. The link is in the description box of each video. It's best to access them with a laptop or a laptop or a desktop. Go to the cell that you want to read, double click, and then you can see the contents of the cell. And you can also copy and paste it onto another document. All right, well, that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. Like this video if you liked it. Leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.